Testing, testing, testing,
Testing, testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
testing, testing, testing. Đúng, I'm serious. Testing. Testing. Can you all hear me clearly? Yes? Good. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this lecture in relation to FITE 7410, Introduction to Financial Fraud Analytics. My name is Annie Chen. I'm one of your lecturers. Today, I would like to discuss with you something interesting, not related to IT because I'm not an IT person, but I do for fraud investigation, forensic accounting, etc. And so I would like to share with you some of my experience during class. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. And let us have a look at the this is my background. Basically, I have got more than 25 years of experience in terms of forensic accounting, fraud investigation, regulatory compliance, and dispute resolution, etc. So in terms of experience, I was previously an enforcement senior manager of the Securities and Futures Commission, and I have also been a partner and managing director of a Big Four firm in Hong Kong and China. And I assisted a lot of multinational companies in terms of, say, investigating fraud, investigating false accounting, investigating breach of code of conduct, breach of trust, etc., and also investigating ethical issues in the workplace. So that's a little bit of my background. I also act as accounting expert in a court of law, which is also part of the work of a forensic accountant. Now, let me share with you the agenda for today. I'm going to talk about, firstly, what is forensic accounting? And then I'm going to discuss with you some of the fraud prevention and detection techniques, some of the red flags of fraud, and how do we advise clients and senior management in terms of fraud risk management, and in case where fraud investigation is really necessary, what do we do, right? Because I understand that you learned a lot about the IT analytics, right, from Vivian. And for me, I would like to share with you some of the practical aspects of doing a fraud investigation. How do we use data analytics in the investigation? How do we use computer forensic and other techniques to help us to investigate and uncover fraud? And I would also like to share with you some of the challenges in terms of COVID-19, which affect the anti-fraud areas. And I mentioned that I act as expert witness in court. I will tell you a little bit about that. And then at the end, I will share with you some of the real life cases, how we utilize the different tools that we have discussed in terms of handling the actual fraud investigation or regulatory issues. So that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. And tonight we have 3 hours, and I will try to give you breaks in between. And in the meantime, I would like you to switch off your mobile phone. If you want to, say, use your mobile phone, you can do that outside the room. And so that's the plan for today. Are there any questions before we move on? Okay. If not, then let us move on. What is forensic accounting? Has anyone heard of the term forensic accounting before? Anyone? None? Raise your hand if you have heard about forensic accounting before. None? Okay. Have you heard about auditing before? Yes? How many? 5. Yeah, good. A number of you, right? And I believe some of you in class may be former auditors or accountants, right? But in terms of forensic accounting, it's quite different from auditing. I'm going to share with you what are the differences shortly, right? So let's go back to what is forensic accounting, right? Actually, it is a discipline that deals with the relationship and the application of financial facts as they relate to legal issues in a court of law. So very often, forensic accountants like me are, say, qualified accountants, and we also have a legal background or a law degree as well, so that we understand what are the legal issues and the legal implications in terms of fraud or in terms of a breach of the regulation. And it allowed us to, say, discuss with lawyers and also senior counsel directly, so that we can help them in terms of collecting the evidence for prosecution or for litigation, right? So as a background, we are an accountant. We focus on the financial facts, right? We leave all the legal issues to the lawyers, but we apply the legal understanding in terms of analyzing the financial facts of a case, right? What are financial facts? Actually, they are basically, say ledger, accounting records, right? And what else? Say, for example, invoices, a debit note, credit note, right? And contracts. All these are documents relating to finance, right? And in terms of collecting evidence, we will help the lawyers to collect the evidence so that they can present to court in terms of what's the case before the court and what are the issues involved, right? And very often, forensic accountant will help in terms of investigating crimes such as bribery, fraud, money laundering, and other white-collar crimes. I mentioned money laundering because very often when we talk about fraud, it would involve money, right? And on the other hand, in terms of money laundering, it refers to the transfer of dirty money from one party to another, right? So very often they are interlinked, right? And that's why fraud and money laundering always go hand in hand. And it is the role of a forensic accountant to investigate and use the different tools such as IT analytics tools, such as computer forensic experts to help us to work together so as to arrive at an investigation report, enclosing all the evidence for the lawyer and the senior counsel so that they can present to court. And if necessary, we also act as expert in court in terms of explaining to the court, explaining to the judge, what does the document show us, right? Why do we think that we have the evidence, right? And apart from that, we may be cross-examined by the other party. Say, for example, in terms of a litigation, right? There are two parties in this bill, right? And each of them will have their set of lawyers to help them. And in terms of us as a forensic accountant and also the expert in terms of the financial facts, we will help them in terms of, say, what the document shows and what needs to be done. Yeah. What needs to be done in terms of the issues and what does it show us, right? And whether there is sufficient evidence in terms of the fraud or irregularities. Okay, so we have gone through the definition of forensic accountant, right? Basically, we apply the financial facts as they relate to legal issues. And very often, these financial facts are, as well as the legal issues, are combined together and then presented to the court. And we as forensic accountant, we sometimes are being asked to act as expert in court and explain to the court and the judge how these financial facts relate to each other and why we think that this is good evidence in terms of the prosecution or the litigation, okay? Now, in terms of a forensic accountant, basically we are financial and fraud investigator. And so we are a bit different from auditors, right? Because auditors, they are, say, accountants from an audit firm. They have the statutory duty to conduct the audit for the company so as to allow the financial position to be presented to the shareholders, to the public if it is a listed company, right? But in terms of us as a financial and fraud investigator, it's a bit different. We come in very often when there are issues, right? Issues of complaint, issues of allegations of irregularities, and issues of, say, breaching of the law, etc. So we are an investigator. We also identify the issues, right? Based on the documentation that we have gone through, we did the analysis. So I said here, an analyst of documentation. We analyze the document, we gather the information. So that's why very often we will request the client who can be a company, senior management, and if we are engaged by a listed company, we will ask the senior management, say, for example, the board of directors for a number of documents, and then they will get someone to coordinate with us and provide us with the documents, right? And in terms of the documents, that could be hard copy, could be soft copy, right? And if we are talking about soft copy, then very often there are a lot of documents that need to be analyzed and a lot of data involved, right? In that circumstances, we may make use of so in terms of our work, we analyze the document, we analyze the people. You may ask me, hey, Ms. Chen, what about analysis of people? How do you analyze people? Anyone? Anyone knows how we analyze people? If you are asked to analyze some people, how do you do that? You will need to know who they are, right? What's their background, right? And what they do, what's their role in terms of the issues, right? In order to do that, you will have to interview them, right? So very often we will interview them. And by interviewing the relevant parties, we will be able to collect information as to say what's the role and responsibility of this particular person, and what area was he involved in terms of the issues before us. And say, for example, if we are talking about, say, misappropriation of company asset, right? Then we will ask how much was involved, right? What sort of assets are we talking about? What sort of assets has been lost, right? And who would be the victim? Is that the company the victim, or actually the client is the victim, right? Say, for example, if we are talking about a brokerage firm, there are assets of the brokerage, right? The security company. There are assets of the security company, but there are also assets of its client. Say, Mr. A would buy some shares with this particular brokerage, and then this Mr. A will place the shares with the company, right? So if the assets of the client, Mr. A, was lost or misappropriated or stolen, then it would be misappropriation of client assets, right? If the asset of the company is lost, then it's misappropriation of company assets, right? Both of them are in contravention of the law. Say, for example, for a brokerage, which is licensed by the SFC, they have the responsibility to ensure that all client assets are intact, i.e. no missing client assets, right? If there are missing assets, that means they have improper internal control and improper segregation of duties in their company, right? So in that circumstances, the regulator, say, for example, the SFC is going to, the Securities and Futures Commission is going to penalize the senior management of the company. And also, very often, the brokerage firm would have to compensate the client for the missing assets, right? So on a regular basis, I deal with this type of fraud regularly. And apart from that, if it is necessary to do to act as an expert in court, then I will write a report, attach all the supporting documents, and then I will explain to the court how much was lost, why was it lost, who has stolen the money, and the current position was what is the current position at the moment, and where is the suspect, right, etc. Right? I will put that in my report. Okay, and apart from that, a forensic accountant will also do fraud prevention and detection, fraud investigation, compliance advisor, as well as internal control review. And in certain circumstances, where, say, for example, assets are lost or stolen or moved outside Hong Kong, then very often lawyers and forensic accountant will be working together to help the client to trace the location of the assets, right? Say, for example, if it is funds, where the funds has gone, say, has it been transferred to, say, BVI or Cayman Islands or other parts of the world, right? And the action has to be taken very quickly, right? I mentioned that anti-money laundering is also another key area because it is always involved in terms of fraud or breaches of the law, right? And I'm going to talk about anti-money laundering in greater length in the next two sections. Litigation support basically to assist the lawyers and the counsels in terms of their prosecutions. Okay, I also mentioned about, say, a listed company, right? Listed company investigation, matrimonial dispute, right? i.e. A divorce of husband and wife. Sometimes one party try to hide all the assets, then lawyers will engage us to chase the whereabouts of the assets, right? So that's what we do. Now, I mentioned that I will tell you what are the differences between the two. Say, for example, for auditing, the objective is to ensure that the financial statement is fairly represented. But in terms of forensic accounting, we try to identify whether there are irregularity, whether there are breaches of the law, whether there are, say, fraud, right? And in terms of the scope, for those of you who has been an auditor before, you will understand that you do limited testing, right? you will select some samples and then do the testing. If the sample looks fine, then you will be happy in that respect, right? And on the other hand, in terms of forensic accounting, we sometimes and very often we do a very detailed review, right? Sometimes we need to look at the transactions 100% in order to find out whether there is fraud or irregularities, right? And standard auditors, they will use international reporting standards, right? But we will look at the law and also look at the regulations. And in terms of training, they are also different, right? We focus more on the legal side and also on the accounting side. But for auditors, they focus on how to do sample testing and how to do the audit. So the approach is also different. Are there any questions before we move on to section 2? If not, then let us have a look regarding fraud prevention and detection. Now, very often, fraud refers to an intentional act by one or more individuals among the management, those charged with governance, employees, or third parties involving the use of deception to obtain an unjust or illegal advantage. This is adopted from the Hong Kong Standard of Auditing, right? Basically, the key word is, it is an intentional act, right? And it involves the use of deception to obtain an unjust or illegal advantage. I have a question for you, right? If I committed a fraud intentionally, and I actually involved the use of deception, but I did not obtain an unjust or illegal advantage. On the other hand, my girlfriend has got an advantage. Is this a fraud? We mentioned that there are 3 elements, right? Intentional act, involve deception, right? Obtain a just or illegal advantage, right? I did it intentionally. I used deception, but I did not get an illegal advantage. Whereas my girlfriend has got an illegal advantage. Is this a fraud? Anyone? Yes.
You can get benefit from your bank, don't you?
Very good. Jason gave us a very good answer, because you can get the benefit from your girlfriends getting the advantage, right? So this is also a fraud, right? Okay, good. And then another key concept, opportunities, motive, and rationalization, the 3 elements of fraud. I understand that you should have learned this from Vivian. I'm not going to spend too much time, right? Next, I want to share with you, in terms of forensic accounting, there is an authority in terms of forensic accounting. In 20 years ago, he did a survey, and he told us that 20% of the people around you are inherently dishonest, right? I.e., no matter what happened, he is going to be dishonest, right? And then 20% of the people around you are inherently honest. No matter what happened, they will be very honest, right? And in terms of the middle, there are 60% of people who could be dishonest in the wrong situation. What does that tell us? So in the wrong situation, 60% of people could be dishonest. In what circumstances, in what situation? Say, for example, the chance of being caught is low, right? And the reward that he or she is going to get is high, then people will think that perhaps I won't be caught. And then I got this, say, 100 million, I don't have to work anymore for the rest of my life, right? And then people could be dishonest. So what does that tell us? When we add the 20% plus the 60%, so 80% of people around you could be dishonest. Isn't that scary? 80%, that's very scary, right? Right? So what's your comment? Do you agree with him? If you agree, can you raise your hand? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 5 of you agree with him. So the rest of you do not agree with him, right? Tell me why. Why you don't agree with him? Anyone? So you agree with him, right? Yeah. Your name?
Well, sometimes I try to lie for more benefit. Well, I believe that many of others may be dishonest.
Okay, any other comments? You want to tell us?
Derek. In Chinese 有句人性本惡啊，可能所以 2% perform dishonor.
So your view is that 人性本惡. So the instinct of a person, right? It's quite negative, right? I see. Okay, so I would say that the percentage may not be exactly absolutely right, but at least it showed us that this area is very significant, right? So depending on what is the wrong situation, right? So we need to be very careful, yeah. And that's why it gave us a lot of cases for investigation, right? Good. Okay, I want to share with you this Transparency International Corruption Perception Index. Okay. Have you heard of this index, CPI? No? And Transparency International. Basically, Transparency International is an international organization focusing on the investigation of fraud and also education of fraud. And they have done the CPI index, which is very well known. And normally they will conduct this, the review of this index every 2 years. And this 2022 CPI is the latest index that we have obtained. And how do I move this? Okay, as you can see, Denmark ranked number 1, New Zealand number 2, Finland also number 2. Now, at the top of this graph, the lower the ranking means the less corruption it will be or perceived by people. So these are countries that are quite clean, right? Denmark, New Zealand, Finland, Norway. Singapore is quite good, number 5, right? What about Hong Kong? Hong Kong is 12, right? What about China? Let's have a look, 65, right? And India, 85. What is at the lowest? Basically, Iraq, North Korea, 171, South Sudan, 178, Somalia, 180, right? So these countries are considered very corrupt, right? And the CPI is very useful, especially for people working in a bank, in financial institutions, when you do the customer due diligence, right? Because you need to accept new client, you need to do the customer due diligence, and then you need to know the background of your client and where do they come from, right? If they are, say, people coming from the countries in the lower areas, then you need to really do additional work, right, in order to accept this particular client. And apart from that, you also need to seek senior management approval, right, before you accept this particular client. And when we talk about anti-money laundering in our next lecture, you will find that it will be useful for you to know about the CPI, right? Okay, now next one I want to share with you is the report to the nations issued by ACFE. ACFE is Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. It is also an international organization focusing on the education of fraud investigation, right? And it's a global organization. It has chapters all over the world. It has chapter in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Japan, Singapore, a lot of area they have chapters. And actually, I'm also a committee member of the Hong Kong chapter. And basically, they focus on the education of anti-fraud areas. And on a regular basis, it organizes training in anti-fraud and fraud investigation. You need to do an exam before you become a member of the ACFE. Basically, the ACFE issue report to the nations every other year. And this ACFE 2022 report to the nations is the latest one. And as you can see, it says that 5% of revenue lost to fraud every year. So 5% actually is quite a lot, right? If we deduct this 5% and then we use it to share among the staff, right, as bonus, that would be very good, right? So this shows that the loss to fraud is very serious. Next, a typical fraud case lost around 8,300 per month. And this is US dollar. And a typical fraud lasts 12 months before detection, right? And for me, while I have been working on over 25 years in fraud investigation, I see that a lot of the cases that I have worked on would be uncovered within probably 4 to 5 years. And that's why they are considered as medium-sized to large-size fraud, right? Now, apart from that, it also says out clearly that 87% of the fraudsters had never been charged or convicted, right? What does it tell us? It tells us that the fraudsters looks like you and me. it is very difficult to distinguish the fraudster from the rest of the people around you, right? And that's why it's very, very difficult to catch the fraudster. And it also sets out that fraudsters, they always live beyond their means, right? When they have stolen the money, they tell themselves that they are very smart, right? And they tell themselves that I need to I deserve a gift to myself, right? Suddenly you heard that the office boy has bought a Ferrari, right? You will ask why, right? And so this is cases of living beyond one's means, right? Especially when you go back to the industry, right? And you work as senior management, I always advise my clients, especially those working in the senior management, you need to always understand more about your staff, right? Understand what is happening in the workplace, understanding the situation of your staff, whether they are very unhappy about the salary revision, or they are having concerns, or they have something that they see irregular, they want to tell you, right? So you need to spend more time in the workplace, discuss with your staff, right? Know more about them, right? Then you will know whether there are anyone living beyond one's means, right? I always suggest my clients talk to the tea ladies, right? Talk to the drivers. They will have a lot of stories to tell you, right? That could be rumors, but at least you understand something is happening or something may be irregular. Then this is some of the red flags, right? Or you may heard that, oh, someone has got a loan shark coming and chasing him in the office, right? Then you will know, oh, someone has borrowed money from loan sharks and are having financial difficulties, right? Then in that circumstances, you need to understand more about yourself, right? And see how you can help him or her, right? Otherwise, if you just couldn't care, then something may happen, right? Apart from that, it also sets out, the report also sets out the main category of fraud, say asset misappropriation, corruption, and financial statement fraud. And sometimes for major cases of fraud, it could have, say, corruption, misappropriation of assets, as well as financial statement fraud, right? So it could be a mixture of a number of them, right? Now, how is fraud detected? By whom, right? The survey tells us that tips is a very important way of detection of fraud, right? Someone, i.e. whistleblower, they may want to tell you something that they saw in the workplace, in your office, right? Among your staff, right? It comprises of 42%, right? But who are those whistleblowers who gave you tips? Majority of them is your employees, 55%, right? Other than that, your customers, 18%, some anonymous people, 16%, right? So these are very useful in terms of detection of fraud. And that's why you may recall that for, say, companies licensed by the Securities and Futures Commission, companies register with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, like bank, brokerages, asset management company, corporate finance companies. They are required to have the whistleblowers channel providing to their clients, right? Very often put it in their website, right? The same applies to listed companies. They are also required by regulators to have a whistleblowers channel. The contact person or contact channel, right? That's why this whistleblower is very important for fraud detection. Now, in terms of fraud prevention, basically, we will talk about three areas. One is physical prevention, another one is system control, and the third one is environmental control. What are they? Now, in terms of physical deterrent, it's easy, right? You can use a lock, right? You can use password control, right? On the other hand, system control, there are a number of things I would like to draw your attention. Say, for example, proper procedures for authorization, right? Regulators always focus on this, right? Always focus on this. Because if you don't have proper policies and procedures, you don't have proper authorization of payment, authorization of some of the contracts that could be loophole for fraud. Proper segregation of duties, right? Say, for example, people working in the front office cannot be allowed to touch anything in the back office because that would be a breach of the segregation of duties, because that would allow fraudsters to conduct their fraud, right? So apart from that, mandatory vacation, you may, if you work in a bank before, you will know that you are asked to take holiday, a block leave, right? Anyone work in a bank before? None? None? Anyone work in financial institutions, securities house, brokerage firm? None? None? Okay, if you work in this industry, you would be advised to take the mandatory vacation, block leave very often, say 2 weeks off, right? What is the reason for this? Because the regulator believe that there should be a policies whereby everyone is allowed a block leave, leaving the office for 2 weeks, and then someone else to take over his work, so that if there are fraud, irregularities, or things like that, can be spotted as soon as possible, right? So this applies to all regulated industry in Hong Kong, i.e. banks, brokerages, a listed company, etc., right? And apart from that, new employee vetting, say, for example, new employees who will be involved in terms of the monitoring of the bank account, monitoring of the funds, then you would definitely need to do the proper vetting of their background before you engage them. And anonymous complaint channel, similar to what I mentioned before, a whistleblower's channel, right? Now, in terms of system control, very often we'll say there should be internal audit, right? And proper internal control. And very often companies will have that either internally or externally. And then another thing which is important is the anti-fraud policy, right? And when I talk to my client, very often they will not be aware of this anti-fraud policy, because this anti-fraud policy is very important. If you don't have the anti-fraud policy, well, your staff may say that, oh, I didn't know I committed something irregular or a bit fraudulent in contravention of the law, but I didn't know that my boss did not allow me to do that, right? So you need to have the anti-fraud policy, and you need to set out clearly the anti-fraud policy. Tell your staff that the company is not going to tolerate any fraud or irregularities, right? And ethical corporate culture is another important thing, and fraud risk training. So I conduct quite a lot of fraud risk awareness training for corporation, bank, brokerages, etc., because it is important for them to show the regulator that they have asked their employees, all of them, to attend fraud awareness training. So they are aware of what is required by the senior management, right? So if anything happened, they cannot say that they didn't know or the boss did not tell them, right? This is not an excuse, right? Code of conduct. Say, for example, SFC has code of conduct. Hong Kong Monetary Authority has code of conduct. Insurance Authority has code of conduct. All these regulated industries, they would require a code of conduct. And actually, it is advisable for every company to have a code of conduct in order to control fraud risk. Now, talking about anti-fraud policy, it is important for the management to set as an example, right? To tell also the policy should be clearly setting out the fact that if anyone has breached the regulation or breached the law, they will be dismissed, right? And apart from that, the company will report to the police or the regulatory authorities. And apart from that, say if there is problem in terms of the senior management, the company will report to the board of directors or actually to the regulators, right? And they will recover what is stolen, right? So it is important for the anti-fraud policy to set out clearly all these guidelines. Next, I'm going to share with you the red flags of fraud. Same, the report to the nations, it says out that very often there are internal control weaknesses in a company. And the reasons for the weakness is that, firstly, a majority of them do not have the proper internal control in place, 29%. And for some of them, they have the policies and procedures in place. They have the internal control in place, but the senior management override it, i.e. sometimes, especially for some companies that are, say, owned by family members, they will try to, say, override the system. I am the boss. I say go, then you go. I say pay, then you as financial controller, you go ahead and pay, right? So in that circumstances, that would be the override of existing control. And the others, poor tone at the top, lack of competent staff, right? These are also some of the internal control weaknesses. Now, some of the red flags of fraud, say, for example, poor internal control, as we mentioned earlier, poor computer file access, password control, which is quite related to your IT areas, override of normal control by management, significant or unusual changes in customers or supplier. Very often when we conduct fraud investigation, we will check whether there are changes in terms of customers or suppliers. And very often we will be able to find irregularities, i.e. some of the customers has gone. Why have they gone? This is some of the questions that we will raise with the management or with the sales, right? Why some of the customer has gone? And then eventually we found out that actually there has been diversion of customers to other companies for a return to someone's private pocket, right? Or changes in terms of supplier. Why was that substantial changes in terms of supplier? Wow, because there could be potential kickback to some of the employees, right? Especially employees who are involved in terms of vetting new suppliers, right? And I'm going to share with you some of the cases at the end of our section. Significant related party transaction, i.e. we can often find that there are related party transaction, i.e. Suppliers are the major supplier is the general manager's wife, right? Or we have related party transactions which are not disclosed to the senior management. There's sort of irregularities. If we see some of these happen in the company, then definitely this will be something that we need to look into. Apart from that, as a forensic accountant, or if some of you are accountants, you will know that very often complex transactions found near the year end would be suspicious, right? Because some of the companies, they want to say build a rosy picture of the company, right? Especially near the year end, right? They will try to push the sales, right? But some of the sales may not be actualized, right? But what they have done is to boost up the revenue in any event at the end of the year so that the financial statement looks very good. But after the year end, they will try to revert the transaction, i.e. say that that's bad debt, right? And we did not get any revenue from that particular customer. So these are some of the red flags, right? Any transaction that lacks documentation or normal approval, significant banks transfer to tax havens such as BVI claimants, that would be some suspicious areas. Or you've got rapid growth or increase in profit, but unfortunately the money doesn't come in, then we will ask why, right? Why was that happening? If you have really good business and you have high profitability, your customer will be paying you, right, in terms of the revenue. But how come this does not generate cash flow? Then there must be something wrong, right? Now, I mentioned that, well, we investigate fraud, right? Who is the fraudster? There could be a number of people, right? Could be external suppliers, right? Suppliers, they may want to provide you with low quality goods, right? But at a high price, right? But what about competitors? Competitors may want to steal your secret formula, right? And what about customers? Customers, they may want to order a lot of goods and then at the end of the day, they declare bankrupt. Then you won't be able to get the money back, right? And apart from that, who else could commit fraud? Internally, there could be officers, managers, employees, and directors. And directors and officers are often involved in terms of, say, insider dealing, market manipulation. These are financial crime because they know some of the sensitive information of the company. Say, for example, they understand that the company is going to have a very good financial position, right? So the share price, if it is announced, the share price will go up definitely, right? So they will make use of the information. They buy more shares at the current rate. And then after announcement or publication of the financial statement, the share price go up and then they sell. Then they reap a profit, right? Is that proper? Definitely not, because you are having the sensitive information, and this information should not be disclosed, right? beforehand and should not be used to say obtain an illegal profit, right? And that's why this is called also a commercial crime. And this would be caught by the Securities and Futures Commission. And if evidence is sufficient, it could be a civil case or a criminal case, depending on what sort of level of evidence is collected, right? And very often it would be trial. If it is a civil case, it would be trial at the Market Misconduct Tribunal in Hong Kong. Employees could be related to, say, misappropriation of client assets, misappropriation of company assets, right? Shall we take a break of 10 minutes and then we'll come back? Okay, a break of 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Now we understand who will commit fraud. Let's have a look at the characteristic of fraudsters, right? Basically, the literature always mention about the 3 R's: rum, race car, and romancers. Basically, people who want to drink very good wine, they need to spend a lot of money, right? Or a very good drinker needs a lot of money to buy good wine. Race cars, say people who love luxury goods, right? And romancers, someone having a wife in Hong Kong, another wife in Shanghai, another wife in Beijing, right? So need to have a lot of money to carry on with the current financial position, right? So in terms of characteristic of fraudster, could be, say, peer group pressure, gambling problem, drug problem. One thing that I want to share with you is living beyond one's means. As I mentioned earlier, suddenly an office boy has got a Ferrari, right? And driving around town, then that could be someone living beyond one's means, right? And as senior management, well, you need to find out what is happening, right? Others, such as being dissatisfied or frustrated with the job, right? Someone who say that I should be promoted this year, but unfortunately my boss promoted somebody else. So I was so unhappy, right? So I want to create trouble to my boss, right? So by, say, stealing some of the company's goods or assets, right? Someone may be seeing beating the system as an intellectual challenge, right? So in that circumstances, you, as senior management, you need to really be careful about that. Or someone demanding exclusive contact with clients. Let me share with you a case where it's a brokerage house, and basically this particular star salesperson demand exclusive contact with all her clients. And suddenly on one day, one of her clients came to the brokerage house and requested the sale of all the shares, and also requesting the sale of all the shares immediately, and also a check immediately. And so the general manager came out and said, well, okay, I will do that for you. Okay. And then he checked the accounts and find out that for this particular client, there's no shares and no credit balance, right? And so they told the client, there's nothing in your account. How come you said you want to sell the shares? What sort of shares are you talking about? And then the client said that, well, I have got China Mobile, I've got HSBC, so many, Tencent, etc. How come you said I don't have any shares, right? And then this particular client was so unhappy. He went all the way to the SFC and then complained the missing assets, right? And so the SFC requested this particular boss of the brokerage house to go to the SFC for interview and for explanation. And at that time, I have left the SFC and I work in the Big Four, in charge of forensic accounting and regulatory compliance. The client asked me to go together with him, and I said, fine. I went together with him, and basically the client said that, well, I have all these shares, I have the statement with me, and how come your brokerage house told me that I have no shares and no money, right? And the brokerage house boss said that, well, I have checked the system. basically you have nothing, right? And how come that happened? And actually the reason was that the star salesperson, this is a lady, she is always the first person to go back to the office and the last person to close the door at the end of the day, right? She never takes any holiday, right? On that particular day, she was sick and was admitted to a hospital. So she cannot pick up the phone when the client called her, right? And so the client went direct to the brokerage house and requested the sale of the shares. And then the fraud was uncovered, right? And at the end of the day, you may ask me, hey, then how come the client has got all the statements showing all the China Mobile, the HSBC, right? Actually, what happened was that the fraudster was the first one to open the door, right? And the last one to leave the office, right? And she has moved all the company stationery, the letter with the letterhead, right? And also all the company seal, company chops, etc. She brought it to her home, used the computer at her home to create falsified statement, right? And apart from that, she's a front office person. She is not allowed to go to the back office, right? But she was the star salesperson. And she said, wow, my client has moved house. I will need to change the address. And then the back office lady said, okay, ask him to submit a form. She said, don't bother. I will change the name myself, right? I will do that. I will sit down and do it now. And then she altered the address of the client, right? So the statement with the zero security, zero bank balance has been sent to the fraudster's control address. And what about the falsified statement? It was produced by the fraudster at home and posted to the real address of the customer. So the customer has always been receiving statements that has got dividend, has got the correct number of shares, but that was a falsified statement, right? And then we investigated the matter and we understand what happened, what went wrong because of internal control problem, right? No segregation of duty. She, as a frontline person, she should not be amending the back office record, but she made the amendment of the address of the client, right? And then she took all the stationery and the stamp home and do the falsification of the statement, right? And apart from that, she also asked the clients to sign some of the blank checks, right? And that's why all these are referring to problem in the internal control, right? And after investigation, we found out that more than 40 clients, 40 clients were falsified in terms of the statements, and they were victims to the fraud. And the whole matter involved more than 20 million Hong Kong. It's not much, but the thing is, quite a lot of them are well educated. Say, for example, medical doctor, university professor, and listed company director, right? Teachers, etc. The reason why she managed to do that is she demands exclusive contact with the client, right? And basically, all the clients call her on the mobile phone. And that's why if you are aware, the SFC and the HKMA require all orders to be made via company phone and also has to be recorded. That's why, so as to unplug the loophole, right? Okay. Next would be fraud risk management. Now, if fraud really happened, who can you trust internally? Who can you trust? Anyone? Anyone? If you are the general manager, right? And you see that there is a potential fraud, right? You need to investigate, right? To find out what happened. Outsiders, right? Like what?
Like some auditing company or some outside auditor.
Very good, very good. Normally you would need to say, get some external consultants to come in because they are more independent and they specialize in this particular area of investigation, right? But internally, you may need to know who you can trust. Maybe you can consider the head of legal and compliance, right? Or the human resources if it involved individual staff, right? So the key is that for external people, it has to be independent. Do you ask your auditor to help you to do the investigation? Definitely not. No, because your auditor is supposed to be doing some fraud risk control measures, right? When they do the audit. And if there is any irregularity or identification of fraud, they should have done some procedures to identify those, unless it is a very carefully organized crime, right? So as you can see, some companies, when they uncover fraud and eventually the company is wound up, the liquidator would definitely pursue the auditor in terms of audit negligence, right? So that is very important because of the independence. Auditor will not be independent in terms of this type of, say, fraud issues. Now, in terms of fraud, you need to consider a number of things. What sort of evidence is available? I mentioned earlier, you need to know what sort of evidence is available, whether that would be sufficient to pursue the legal action, right? And also you need to preserve the evidence, especially if it is a software, right? And hard copy, you need to preserve. Software, you need to ensure that soft copy is preserved. And very often you would need to use data analytics specialists like yourself or computer forensic experts to clone the computer in order to, say, do the analysis. Say, for example, you need to assess the damage. If, say, transfer of funds outside Hong Kong could be involved, then you need to ask the lawyer to do a freezing order in order to freeze the money from transferring out, right? Notification to insurer and regulator. If you are a regulated industry, you would definitely need to notify the regulator, say, for example, the SFC license parties, you need to notify the SFC in terms of the fraud. And if it is licensed by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, you need to notify the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, ASAP. And in terms of insurer, quite a lot of companies, they would have the fidelity insurance in place. Then you need to notify the insurer so that the insurer would be able to understand the position, and then they can assess whether they will, say, provide you with the damages, i.e. whether you can claim the insurer, right, for the damages. And if it is a criminal offense, then you may need to, say, work with the police. in terms of investigation, basically is a fact-finding exercise. You need to identify and collect all the relevant information, as I mentioned before. Say, for example, contract, invoices, right? Debit note, credit note, right? And the ledger, the accounting records, all these documentation, you need to identify and collect them, both hard copy and also soft copy, right? Because currently everything is on the soft copy, then you need to make sure that if the computer would not be, say, computer data would not be deleted. And if it is deleted, then, well, it is important for you to get, say, computer forensic expert to undelete the data, i.e. to recover the data as soon as possible. And because that's the sooner that you go through the computer forensic process, the earlier that you will be able to get hold of the deleted information and data to determine if the issue raised have any substance or not. Because sometimes when you do the investigation, that could be based on, say, a whistleblower. If it is a whistleblower's information, it could be factual and could be manipulated, right? You do not know, right? You need to understand whether it has substance or not. If it, after the investigation, you see that there is substance, and this matter may involve different areas. Is it the breach of the law or the breach of the regulation of the authority? If it is a breach of the law, is it civil case or criminal, right? And how serious it is? What is the implication to the company? What is the implication to the senior management? Would senior management be penalized personally, right? And would the company be penalized? And if so, to what extent? You need to know, right? And you need to get advice from your lawyer and or consultants. So basically, when we do the investigation, we will interview the management and the relevant staff. The relevant staff, depending on the type of investigation, if it is, say, possible diversion of company business, then you would definitely need to know who has diverted the business, right? And what sort of business are involved, right? And especially which team of staff are involved in terms of, say, the sales, right? And how come some of the business has gone without notifying the general manager? So all these need to be asked, right? So as forensic accountant and investigator, we will need to investigate all these. And then quite a lot of them, we got the information from the interview, right? But of course, interview required experience and also common sense and also knowledge of the case, right? So before we go into actually interviewing the management and the relevant staff, we need to get all the information available and then plan the interview beforehand, right? Rather than just start the work and then go and interview well, you need to think really careful and got all the supporting documentation ready before you go and interview people, especially if you are interviewing some of the suspects, right? So need a lot of preparation and need a lot of experience. And for forensic accounting like us, we very often will review the accounting records and the major contracts, the documentation such as invoices, etc., and also get data analytics to help us to, say, do the analysis of the data throughout a number of years to find out what's the trend does the trend make sense to us? If not, what doesn't make sense, right? Based on the deliverable obtained from data analytics, we can challenge the fraudster and also present it to the management, right? So that's very important to combine data analytics, computer forensic, and also accounting knowledge in terms of the investigation. Apart from that, we also do investigation of suspicious transactions, depending on how many transactions we are talking about. If the volume is large, definitely data analytics would be able to help us, because by using just Excel or by using manual method, it's not possible to analyze so many transactions if there are thousands and thousands of transactions involved, right? So your role is very important for doing a major investigation. And then we need to quantify the loss suffered, right? And we need to know what was involved in terms of the loss. Was the loss to the company, or was the loss to the client of the company? Was that any breaches of the regulation, etc.? And what is the penalty for breaches of the regulation? Who would need to be, say sentenced to imprisonment? You need to find out all these, right? The important thing is you need to carefully plan all these steps and then collect the evidence for trial. That's why documentation is very important. After interviewing people, we definitely will write an interview note, and then depending on how serious the allegation is and how concrete the evidence we have got, sometimes, as say, for me currently, I'm a consultant, but while I was enforcement senior manager at the SFC, we will request the interviewee to sign and confirm that he's happy with the content of the interview note, right? And sometimes we use a written record. Sometimes we will use the videotape, and sometimes audio tape, depending on the situation, right? For me currently, working as a private investigator and consultant, normally we will use a note to record what is discussed, right? And if it is really, really necessary, we will tell the client that we will use, say, videotape or audio tape, right? If it is so serious, right? Now, in terms of internal investigation, you need to understand exactly what is the purpose for the investigation. And you need to know whether it is violating the regulatory requirement, or say, for example, whether money laundering or other irregularities are involved. And it is important, if it is an internal investigation, you need to protect the company, right? Enable the institution to minimize its liabilities, right? Because if the investigation found out that a company did not do it properly and did not have proper policies and procedure to convey it to the staff, and that's why the staff did not do the work properly, then both the staff, the company, and the senior management will be penalized, right? Say, for example, for the staff, if he or she has contravened the regulation, he or she will be penalized by, say, being fined by the SFC, and the responsible officer, i.e. the senior management, will also be asked why he or she did not properly supervise the staff. If so, the responsible officer may also need to be suspended in terms of the license. So it is actually, it is important for the management to provide proper guidance to the staff. And at the end of the day, the company itself may also need to pay fines. And in the real concrete situation where evidence is sufficient, the regulator may also need to make a decision as to close down the business of a company if it is the situation is too bad, right? And it is also important for companies to make sure that the same problem will not happen again, because regulator always asks, okay, now that you have this problem, and I understand that you have you have problem in your policies and procedure, you have problem in your internal control, and you have problem in terms of your supervision of your staff. How do you ensure the same problem will not happen again in the future? Then you need to have a proposal. You need to have a remedial plan to provide to the regulators. And if the remedial plan is accepted by the regulator, well, the regulator may come up with a settlement agreement with you. And the settlement agreement normally will be discussed among yourself and also your lawyer. And depending on how serious it is, there could be a fine of, say, a few $1 million if it is quite serious, and then maybe a suspension of the responsible officer, i.e. the senior management. And also, apart from that, the regulator may require a company to engage a consultant to help you with the remedial plan, i.e. how do you improve your internal control? How do you improve your, say, segregation of duties? How do you improve your policies and procedure? How do you improve your training of your staff to ensure that they understand clearly what's the roles and responsibility, and also they understand exactly the regulation in terms of the imposed or issued by the regulators. So all these should be in a proper remedial plan to ensure that the regulator will be happy with the arrangement before they can close the file. Otherwise, it could drag on and on for years. I have seen cases where the case has been dragging on for 3 to 4 years, and whereby the regulator has concern in terms of the firm to continue business. So the regulator may say that, okay, until you have your remedial plan in place, until the independent consultant has checked and confirmed that your remedial plan work properly, your internal control has enhanced, and your policies and procedure has enhanced. Otherwise, you will not be able to, say, get additional clients. You can allow your client to sell the portfolio, but you cannot get additional client. So your business will be similar to a closing down situation. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. You won't be able to have more business. You can only wind down the business. So the regulators in Hong Kong are very, very tough, I would say, especially the Securities and Futures Commission. The HKMA is also quite tough in enforcing their regulations, because Hong Kong is an international center. If there are fraud in the financial industry, it would affect the image of Hong Kong from the international investors. Okay, so in terms of internal investigation, now what you need to know is that the investigation procedure need to be applied. And the objective is to determine who, what, where, when, why, how, and how much, i.e. who was involved, what was involved, where did it happen, when did it happen, why did it happen, and how did it happen, and how much was involved. You need to answer all these questions, right? So it's not easy. Conducting an investigation is not easy, right? You need to ask yourself all these questions and then determine who you're going to interview and then go for it, right? And in terms of the techniques, you need documentary evidence, right? You need to search a public record, the database, computer database, and you need to look at the contracts, the loan agreement, the bank record, the financial statement, etc. Right? And also testimonial evidence. You need to interview, right? And then get the the oral evidence from them. And apart from that, you may also need to get someone to do the surveillance, right? But for me, I seldom do this. If I need to do the surveillance confirmation, then I will use other firms that has got many ex-police, and they do quite a lot of work in terms of surveillance, right? Do you know what is surveillance? Are you aware of what is surveillance? I.e. someone is asked to follow someone, Mr. X, say Mr. X, follow Mr. X from early morning until at night, and then take some photos and jot down when he is meeting which person and which place he has gone to. Take some photos, maybe say following this Mr. A for a number of days, and then come up with a report and come up with a photo. Okay, so for me, I try not to do this and leave it to some special firms to do this surveillance, because they are quite skillful in doing this. They have some very skillful ex-police who specialize in this area. Data analytics is your area, right? And computer forensic, right? And very often for major investigation, there will be data analytics specialists as well as computer forensic specialists working together with us to come up with the whole investigation report. So your role is very important. Other physical evidence such as fingerprint, handwriting, document examination, etc., depending on the circumstances and the requirement. Now, in terms of law enforcement investigation, I mentioned that I work at the SFC as enforcement senior manager, right? So as a law enforcement agent, there are a lot of work that we can do, but now I'm a private consultant, so a private investigator, so I may not be able to do some of the work as before. Say, for example, when I was senior manager with the SFC, I can say, write a memo to the immigration department, and then I can get all the information about this particular person, who, say, for example, find out when they leave Hong Kong, when they come back to Hong Kong, at what time, right? To what location, I can find out. And I can also find out, say, for example, a suspect. A suspect is a woman, and one of the case is a woman. And then I find out the name of her husband, her mother, her sister, her brother, all the family trees, their ID number, their photo, etc. So it would allow me to do very thorough investigation. But as a private investigator, I may not be able to do all these unless I am engaged by the SFC or the Department of Justice. I want some documents to tell me to be clear as to something happened at a particular time, particular place. Then I will ask them. I will ask the regulator, such as the Department of Justice, Commercial Crime Bureau, to provide me with some of the documentation, and then they can go and get it. Say, for example, recently I worked with the SFC on a project, and I found that there are funds transferred to different bank accounts from the core bank accounts. And for the time being, the regulators did not get the information. So because they are not aware that the funds has gone to other bank accounts. So I asked them to collect the bank statement of all these other bank accounts. And so they are liaising with the banks, and it would be provided to us very soon. So it helps a lot because regulators would be able to get information quite easily, but as a private investigator may not be so easy. And but of course, for regulators, if there is a reason, there is a basis, then they will get the information for you, right? And apart from that, the documents and the testimony are designed to allow law enforcement to investigate suspicious transaction, develop evidence for prosecution, right? And I recall that while I was at the SFC doing the investigation, I applied to the court for a search warrant of in relation to a listed company, and we requested a search warrant on a number of premises, including the office premises of the listed company, the home address of the director, and the home address of some of the officers. And basically what happened was that on a particular day, we applied to the court for the warrant, the search warrant, and then we get a big team to be together. And then once the warrant is collected, we divide it to a few teams, right? And there is a leader in one team. Basically, we have 4 teams together. We went out together, and then we communicate to each other in order to find out what is happening in different locations. The reason why we need to do it simultaneously is that we do not want the information to be disclosed from one party to another party, so that the document might be concealed or destroyed, right? So it's quite exciting, quite interesting, right? Being a law enforcement officer. I understand that some of you are also law enforcement officer, right? You are too shy to tell me. Okay, never mind. You can tell me after class. Huh? Okay, so in terms of the law enforcement investigation, we need to monitor the response to law enforcement investigation. Say, now I'm a consultant. I work for financial institution, for listed companies, right? When they have, say, they have issues with regulators, I always tell them that, well, you ensure that everything is reviewed by senior management or legal counsel, maintain a central control point over all requests and responses, and you need to deal with regulator really carefully. You need to cooperate. You need to be on good terms with regulators and to understand what they need, right? The important thing is not to provide additional information, right? Because I recall when I was enforcement senior manager, I did an investigation. We went to a brokerage firm. It's quite a major brokerage firm. And we requested the client statement of a particular account executive, right? And basically they said, well, this particular account executive has got 8 key accounts. And we said, we want all these 8 accounts, right? And unfortunately, the compliance officer gave me all accounts of the whole firm. If you were me, would you get, what would be your response? You requested 8 statements, the statement of 8 clients, but the compliance officer gave you everything. Will you collect it? Yes or no? Anyone say yes? You all say no? Anyone? Anyone? Do you think? Would you get all of them?
I think it's too much.
It's a straightforward answer. Anyone else? You want to get all the statements of all the clients? No one? What I have done is I call up my department head, the senior director, and I said, well, they gave me everything. He said, good, grab all of them. Okay, we get all of them, and then we come back and we focus on the 8. And then we also look at the others, right? And then we find out the issue is not simply that particular account executive restricting to 8 accounts. Other accounts have all got similar irregularities. So apart from penalizing one account executive, we penalize the other 3 account executives too. So don't voluntarily give document or information not requested by regulator. Okay, so next, I would like to share with you the anti-fraud challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Although COVID-19 pandemic has gone, but well, you never know, right? It may come back, right? But during COVID-19, actually is affecting the overall level of fraud. And basically, it was observed that there was an increase in fraud due to COVID-19 because the ACFEA has arranged a survey, and it was said that 79% of the respondents said that there was an increase in overall level of fraud, right? And within that 79%, 38 said that the increase has been very significant, right? The reason was that because now look at the statistics here, right? You can see that there has been significant increase, right? Okay, what sort of fraud are increasing? It was it was found out that cyber fraud and payment fraud are the two increasing at the highest space, right? So cyber fraud is also something you can help, right? Business email compromise, hacking, ransomware, and malware, right? All these has been increasing substantially during COVID-19. And of course, currently we can see that a lot of the frauds are relating to IT, right? Payment fraud, credit card fraud, fraudulent mobile payment, right? Calling you on your mobile and falsifying, pretending to be someone else, pretending to be your relatives, right? Seeking for help. Why was that? Because of the problem of COVID-19, the fraud, normally fraud investigators, they will say be responsible for a whole region. Say, for example, a global company, they would have a fraud investigation team in Asia Pacific, say, for example, located in Hong Kong or in Singapore. And in Europe, they would have another team. In US, they would have another team. But because it is not possible to travel within the region, so a lot of the fraud investigation, fraud risk assessment would be stopped, right? It is very difficult to conduct fraud investigation over phone. Fortunately, we have Zoom, but still, Zoom interview is not as good as a normal face-to-face interview. So that's why the COVID-19 has affected the situation, and fraud risk and fraud cases has been increasing. Okay, shall we take a break of 10 minutes and then we'll come back and talk about expert witness? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let us resume. In the next section, I'm going to talk about expert witness. Now, you may ask, who is an expert witness? Actually, anyone who is qualified by knowledge, skill, or training or experience or a particular area can be an expert. Say, for example, myself, I am an accounting expert in court. If there is a situation where the judge would like to get an accounting expert, then I will be the expert. For you, after you have worked in the data analytics for a number of years, then you may be qualified by knowledge, skill, training, or experience or education in data analytics, then you will become a data analytics expert witness. Now, basically, as an expert, you have to be independent and you need to have integrity. You need to be competent in your area of expertise. You need to have a substantial number of years of experience, and you need to properly plan your work. You need to get the relevant data. Say, for example, for you, you work in data analytics, you need to present to the court how you collect the data, how you analyze the data, and what does the data tell you or the reader in terms of the implication of the data in the particular case, right? And you need to communicate with your client. Say, if you are a consultant, you need to properly communicate with your client. If you are an internal IT analytics person, you need to communicate with your colleagues, with your boss, right? And you need to have good reputation with lawyers and judges, right? That is very important because as an expert, if you do not have good reputation, if you fail in a particular case where the judge said that this particular expert is not good because you did not prepare your data properly and your analytics is not good enough, then you have a problem. You have a problem, right? Then you will not be able to act as an expert in court in that particular industry for the whole of your life, right? So it is very important. The reputation with lawyers and judges is very important. And that's why when we submit an expert report to the court, we need to check really carefully in terms of the data, in terms of the analysis, in terms of the conclusion, in terms of the assumption, etc., right? And very often we will check our report a number of times. Sometimes, actually, one of my staff said, well, I have amended this report for almost 10 times. You're still not satisfied. And I said, well, let me tell you, the best expert in our area normally will amend the expert report up to 12 to 13 times before he is satisfied. So for me, almost 10 times is not an issue. It's normal, right? It's not demanding, right? So that's why you need to check. You need to check, say, for example, the English. You need to check the data. You need to check your analysis, whether it makes sense. And you need to make sure that your assumption and the conclusion are concrete. Because at the end of the day, you are an independent expert, but you will be challenged by the other party if you say that this is a, say, for example, if I say this is a case of say market manipulation, right? Based on the information available, I see that this is likely a market manipulation. Then the other party will say, I do not agree with what you said. probably your assumption is not good, or probably the data you have used is not sufficient to prove the conclusion. So someone must be able to challenge you. So you need to think of what the other party going to challenge you and what would be your response. You would better put everything in the report so that it would be very concrete, so that people won't be able to challenge you in terms of what you said, right? Now, in terms of the code of conduct for experts, it was set out clearly in Order 38, Appendix D. It says that the general duty is to the court, not the party paying you, right? The expert report has to be verified, and a report by the expert must specify the person's qualification as an expert, the facts, the matter, the assumption on which the opinion are based. Reason for the opinion, right? For that particular question or issue fall outside his area of expertise, he has to set out, i.e., I am an expert in accounting. For other areas which may be outside my area of expertise, I need to set out, right? And what sort of literature or what sort of material you have utilized in support of the opinion, you need to set out. Any examination, test, or investigation that you have relied on. Say, for example, if my report has based on some of the analytics that my colleague, data analytics colleague has done, then the data analytics colleague should set out clearly what sort of tests you have done and what sort of investigation and that you have relied on, and also identify the details of the qualification of the person who carry out the work. Say, for example, I would say I am an expert, a forensic expert. I have relied on my colleague who is an data analytics specialist. He has worked on this area for how many years? He has worked on different cases, including these A, B, C cases, right? And so you need to set out clearly what sort of basis you have relied on and the details and identity of the qualification of the person who carried them out, right? So for a data analytics specialist like yourself, you need to be really careful in order to help your boss or the expert to do the presentation in the court, right? And very often, the judge may also get the data analytics specialist to be examined in the court, right? Say, for example, I have seen cases where my computer forensic expert who helped me to do the computer forensic, he and I will go to the court and the judge will ask me in terms of the accounting matters and ask my computer forensic expert in terms of what he has done, how he arrived at the conclusion, how he has retrieved the data from the computer, etc., and why he come up with the analysis, right? So this has to be very, very careful. And an expert should not be a high gun, i.e., someone pay you money and then you help him to do some report which is not factual, but basically used to act as a gun to shoot the other side. So this is not good enough. Advocate, as an expert witness, we are neutral. We are not an advocate in court. Leave it to the lawyer and the counsel to be the advocate. We should not be biased. An expert of fact, because expert of fact is not an expert witness, right? You know the facts, you are a factual witness. You are not an expert witness. Say, for example, for car accident, well, someone who saw the car accident, he is a factual witness, right? He saw it, right? He saw the accident. He will tell the court the facts, right? But for us, we will say, for example, we will work on other areas. Say for me, I work on the accounting side, right? So it's a bit different. And in terms of the car accident, apart from the factual witness, there may be expert witness. Say, for example, someone who knows the car industry very well, and he may be able to tell the judge in terms of the car accident, was that because of the machine, or was that because of the road is slippery? So someone in that particular area will help the court specifically in terms of the area that they have in terms of the expertise. Now, what your expert can do, right? If you are the client, the expert can say, do the document review and request the other side for document, highlight key issues, discovery question, and attendance. Discovery is, i.e., to go to the court and ask the other side for the documents. Income or loss of profit determination, i.e., calculation, right? Profit forecast, cash flow forecast, discounted cash flow forecast, share valuation when there is a shareholder dispute, one party may be buying out the other side. So a valuation expert will be engaged. Settlement assistance, say, for example, in terms of the matter before you, the two parties can agree settlement instead of going to the court, right? Case conference, basically to discuss with the senior counsel. Trial appearance, i.e. to attend the trial, right? You don't have to know all these. The thing is, it is quite legal, but the thing is, it tells you what an expert can do. And basically, you need to know what is an expert. You need to know what's the professional standard required, the independence, of integrity, competence, relevant data, and reputation with lawyers. These are the key professional standards as an expert. And there are also requirements in terms of the code of conduct as an expert. You need to make sure that you know the facts, assumption, the reason for each opinion expressed, etc. Right? These are for your information. These two slides are for your information. So basically, you need to hire the team early. There could be accounting expert, valuation expert, environmental expert, economist, right? So you need to understand what the approach of the expert, right? And you also need to know the other side's expert, because for a litigation, there are two sides. Each side will engage an expert, right? The important for you is, it is important to ensure that you prepare, right? Because at the end of the day, you may become a data analytics expert, and then you would need to go to court, right? If you choose this area, which is you need to accumulate a number of years of experience. I think probably 8 to 10 years of experience before you can be called an expert, right? Then you need to go through all these areas. The key is to prepare. And for us, we often set out in our report to use the right assumption we calculate, right? So don't double count. Make sure you understand your report. And then the judge asks you, you know how to answer. Here it says touch the paper because if anyone has worked in a Big Four firm, you understand that the partners do not actually touch the paper. The partners will get the job in, right? And the manager, the senior associate and the associate will do the work. Actually, the partner do not do the work. The partner get the job in, right? So they do not touch the paper. But at the end of the day, it is the partner that has to go to the court to act as the expert because the partner has got more than 15 years of experience, whereas the senior may only have 3 years, 4 years experience, right? They would not be the expert. It's the partner that does the work as an expert. So the partner, if the partner doesn't touch the paper, doesn't really understand what is happening, just read out the report prepared by the manager or the staff, then he is definitely in trouble because he will be challenged by the other parties as to why you use this assumption, why you did not use other assumptions, what is the basis for your analysis, why do you think that you come up with this conclusion, not other conclusion, right? So really be careful about this, right? And very often we will use a picture, right? And or a flow chart, right? To make sure that it is easier to understand, right? Okay, let me share with you some of the real life cases. Now, this is in relation to a company in Shanghai. Actually is a subsidiary of a US global company, and the US headquarters has obtained a whistleblower's complaint. You recall that we mentioned about whistleblowers, right? Whistleblower complaint, and the legal counsel of the US headquarters instructed us to conduct an investigation on the China operation in Shanghai. And the complaint was that there was inflation of revenue, falsification of expenses, and bribery, right? So what we have done is we look at the revenue, look at the expenses for the relevant period. They want us to look at the 3-year period. We interviewed the management and the staff, and then we found out that there were fictitious sales. Sales booked at the end of Q2, Q3, and Q4 were reversed in Q1 of the following year. As you may recall, earlier of our session, I mentioned that a lot of the companies, when they are close to year end, right, they will boost up the sales, right? For US companies, they always report to the headquarters at the end of each quarter. So at the end of Q2, Q3, and Q4, they push up the sales. But all these fictitious sales were reversed in Q1. And at the end of the day, the senior management has got their bonus already, right? So these fictitious sales were really an issue in this particular company. We also found out that there are dummy companies that are used to cover up fraudulent transactions and bribery. We also found out that bogus transaction, i.e. false transaction, were used to cover up the cash and gift made by the company's sales executive to third party to secure business. Now, because this US company, they would not allow cash and gifts made by company executive, right, to third parties to secure business, because this is in violation of the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and it is also in violation of the China local bribery law, right? Unfortunately, they have paid bribes to state-owned enterprises. And state-owned enterprises is regarded as government officials because they are government officials. So this particular US company has violated the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And the consequence is that they have to pay substantial financial penalties and they suffer serious reputational loss, right? So this is a real case. Now, another one, all these are real life cases, but I just don't want to disclose the name. You may be able to find out more, right? It's a metals recycling company listed on the stock exchange. We were engaged by the SFC to investigate what happened, what went wrong. And basically the company was listed on the stock exchange in 2009. And the SFC said that they are operating a round-robin fund flow scheme, i.e. the fund flow was fictitious, right? And we have done an investigation and we look at the pattern of the fund flow. That's why we need data analytics to help us. And we comment on the sales position and the gross profit in the prospectus, in the IPO, right? And we interview the management. We also review the company documents. And we also understand that the SFC has also interviewed some of the management. So we look at the interview records. At the end of the day, it went to the court, and the Honorable Justice Harris said that the evidence adduced by the commission, i.e. the SFC, establishes that is a fraud on a massive scale has been perpetrated, right? And that's why this company should not carry on business. And the judge decided that this company has to be wound up and made a winding up order, right, against them, based on the submission made by the SFC. And basically, the SFC used two reports. One report is our report, and the other report is a shipping expert report. And this is one of the analysis. As you can see, this particular company has got a Macau operation, which is the key operation of the company. The name of the company is in Macau, the operation is called CMR. And CMR is the main operating arm. And we see that there is a round-robin fund flow. As you can see, 273 million US dollar has been transferred to the suppliers, right? And 273 million together with Hong Kong dollar 35 million, you can see here, right? And it has been sent to the suppliers. There are only a few suppliers, right? And okay, and then we see that the money, 274 million, has been transferred to the company's customers. And apart from that, Hong Kong dollar 35 million was also transferred. As you can see, this is 273 million US dollar, 35 million Hong Kong dollar, and outflow is 273 million US dollar, Hong Kong dollar 35 million. It is 99% the same. And also, it is so strange. Now, CMR pay the supplier. That's fine. That's fine, right? You pay your supplier. How come your supplier knows your customer? If your supplier knows your customer, what's the point of using you as an intermediary? Right? Okay, let's have a look. This doesn't make sense, right? The fund flow from supplier to your customers, right? Okay, from customer back to CMR. 276 million US dollar, quite close to 273, right? And Hong Kong dollar 4.6 million, right? Still, it's quite close. It's over 90%, close to the amount from this round robin. And that's why the SFC think that this is a potential fraud. Let's have a look. We check 208, okay. So this is before listing, before the IPO, right? Now we look at after IPO. After IPO, we also look at the same suppliers and customers, right? We see that there are additional supplier and additional customers, but the pattern is still the same. It doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense. So it appears that the SFC's allegation of a round robin, i.e. nothing happened, but actually the money went through all these parties and going back to the company. So the revenue is fictitious, right? The income is fictitious. The payment is also fictitious, right? Now, this is another one. And basically, we found out that these suppliers are mainly organized by the managing director of this particular listed company, i.e. some of these suppliers are his former staff setting up the companies to trade with CMR. And apart from that, we also understand that the chairman owns approximately 53% of the shares of the company. And he thought that this is his own company, right? Because quite a lot of the managing director or chairman of listed company, they believe that the company is his, right? Because he's the substantial shareholder. But unfortunately, for listed companies, it is not possible to treat the company as your own company, right? You need to report to regulators. You also need to report to the small investors, the shareholders, right? So at the end of the day, we have found circular fund flow in unusual manner, and it is lacking in commercial substance. And apart from our report, the shipping expert also concluded that 71% of the shipment did not happen, and 9.6% is unlikely to be genuine shipment. So at the end of the day, over 80% of the shipments were fictitious. So that's why the court decided that this company has to wind up in order to save the small investors. We also arrived at another conclusion, stating that in terms of the revenue, it has been pushed up more than 46%, and the gross profit has been overstated by over 72%, right? So this is a quite big case of the SFC, and the SFC was very pleased with the outcome. Okay, next, another case is a fund flow tracing project involved over 200 million. And I was engaged by the Department of Justice to perform a fund flow tracing project involving 9 individuals and two companies. And basically, these 2 companies and 9 individuals, they apply for invoice loan from 7 banks using fake sales and purchase invoices. And I have examined over 30 bank accounts and bankers' information. Of course, I have my staff to help me, right? And over 200 million bank loan were provided to the companies involved. But at the end of the day, the company wound up and unable to pay any of the loans, right? And then at the end of the day, the banks know that they were the victims, right? And that's why the Department of Justice engaged us to do the investigation and then prepare the expert report. And I testify as the expert witness at the court. And at the end of the day, one of the defendants was sentenced to 6.5 years imprisonment for fraud. Now, another interesting case is a divorce case. It involved a couple of over 70 years of age. You may ask, why do they want to proceed with divorce, right? Because they were encouraged by their children. Because the male want to transfer the money to his girlfriend and also his son, while the female want to transfer the money to her daughter, right? And basically, the wife said that, well, I want a divorce, and I understand that the money has been transferred to the husband private pocket, right? There are allegations of diversion of funds from those companies and the individual bank accounts. So we trace the funds flow involved in terms of 10 years accounting record. And I also acted as expert witness in court. So that was a very interesting case of a aged couples. Eventually, the wife won, and the wife thanked me for helping her, right? And I said, well, basically, I look at the record and I see that there has been diversion of money and funds to the private pocket of the husband, right? Now, another case is in relation to fraud investigation on the local management and his alliance for a European chemical company in Indonesia. Basically, it's also a whistleblower's complaint received by the headquarters of a European chemical company, and saying that the country managing director in Indonesia has been diverting business and also corruption. So what we have done is we conducted company searches, database searches, computer forensic imaging, keyword search, email search, and also interviewed the suspect and the staff. And eventually, we found out that the allegation was concrete, and so provided a report to the headquarters. And there was a structural dismissal of all the staff, and the country manager was replaced. And apart from that, this is a German technical company, and basically it's anti-bribery and compliance due diligence engagement. And basically I do the same, interview the management and the staff, review the accounting record, conducted sample testing, and we identify some issues of bribery and provided the comment to the client who engaged us. And then he make a decision as to whether to buy this particular company or not, because they really want to buy this particular company, but eventually found out that there were issues of bribery. And at the end of the day, they proceeded with buying this company, but at a lower amount. And also they also managed to put in a particular terms in the contract saying that if there are any issue in terms of bribery involving the previous period, the the seller is responsible for all the fines or issues, right? So that's an interesting case. Another one I would like to share with you is a European food manufacturer in China. And also an anonymous complaint email received by the senior management of the China operation of a European company. And we were engaged by the headquarters in Europe to conduct an investigation in terms of the allegation. We interviewed the management, the staff, reviewed the accounting record, look at the supplier selection process, and we saw there are some irregularities, conducted the company searches to assess the potential conflict of interest, and we also developed the relationship tools, developed the relationship analysis. I don't know whether you use iTool. We use iTool to track the relationship of the staff and the supplier. And eventually we found out that there are non-approved suppliers used by the company. And basically these non-approved suppliers were owned by the senior staff's relatives. This violates the company policy. And we identify the issue and collect the information and the document, right? And we discuss with the client in terms of the findings, and the senior management and the staff involved were either dismissed or penalized. One thing which is quite interesting is we interviewed the senior management in China, is a European, and I said, there are some records. We saw your name. You signed on it, right? How come you approve those non-approved suppliers to do the work for you? And how come the rates charged by these suppliers are higher than the previous suppliers? And apart from that, some of the previous suppliers were not used, and you use some new suppliers who did not provide quality products. The management in China said that, you know, I have my difficulties. I don't read Chinese. My staff asked me to sign, so I signed. And I said, well, before you transfer, are you supposed to know Chinese? And he said, I need a job. I need a job. Well, I can speak a few sentences of Mandarin, but I don't read the documents, right? I can't read Chinese. They asked me to sign and I signed, right? So there are issues like this in some of the multinational companies in China, right? At the end of the day, he was dismissed, and this is not a happy ending, but eventually it shows what is happening in some of the multinational companies in China. Are there any questions? Any questions for me? No questions? Now that I have shared with you some of the experience in terms of investigating fraud, right? And in terms of exam, you may be asked to prepare a plan how you investigate, right? Some of the a potential case, then you need to know how to do it and how to utilize your data analytics, right? Also the investigation skill in order to do the case study, right? Any other questions? No? Okay, if not, then I'll see you Next week? Next week? No. Sorry? 25, okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'll see you in the next class then. Okay, thank you, bye. Yeah. Perform the work.
So you need to interview all the buyers, customers, like get there. It's a lot of work.